everyone. Welcome to the UNESCO Chair for a Culture Toward Economic Peace webinar series. My name is Charis Lee. I'm Assistant Professor of Marketing at Grenoble Ecole Management and also affiliated researcher of the chair. The Economic Peace Chair at the GEM was created by Dominic Steiler and has celebrated its 10th anniversary last year. In January of 2023, we received UNESCO endorsement and became the UNESCO Chair for Culture Toward Economic Peace. The concept of economic peace questions economic players' contribution to the common good and explores new economic models and new ways of creating and sharing value. At the chair, we covers four axes of research: the economic peace with the self and in relationship with organizations, inter-organization and territorial peace, and also structural and ecosystem peace. At the chair, we started this webinar series where we invite scholars who do research that explores ways to go towards economic peace in their respective area to share their expertise and their research. And today, we're honored to have Professor Amitava Chattopadhyay from INSEAD. Professor Chattopadhyay is Professor of Marketing and Chair Professor of Corporate Innovation, and also a marketing area chair at INSEAD. And he holds a Ph.D. from the University of Florida, which is also my Ph.D. alma mater, and also other degrees from prestigious universities in India. Professor Chattopadhyay is very prolific in marketing research and leading expert in branding and innovation. And he has also done research recently in the area of social innovation and how businesses can help the society to improve towards economic peace. So today, we will listen to Professor Chattopadhyay on his talk about doing good at scale, understanding how a CSR project becomes a source of competitive advantage. The talk will be about 45 minutes, and after that, we'll open to Q&A. And following the webinar, you'll be able to see the video posted online on our website. Now, I yield the stage to Professor Amitava Chattopadhyay.
Thank you, Charis, for that very nice introduction. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to the UNESCO Chair for Economic Peace for inviting me here today. Most of my work has been experimental in nature, and I've really been primarily interested in branding. And so this paper is a counterpoint to that in many, many ways, in the sense that brands typically are built by companies so that they can charge a premium price, and that doesn't go very well with alleviating poverty, for example. At the same time, I grew up in India, and back then India was a lot poorer than it is today, and there was a lot of poverty all around. And I've always been interested in how can we impact poverty. And so this paper is my first effort at trying to look into it from a research point of view. And it's different from my past research, not only in terms of topic, but in terms of methodology. So as a dyed-in-the-wool experimental researcher, it's kind of interesting that I'm doing qualitative research, which is sort of the other extreme, if you will, of research methods. And it's my first ever presentation of qualitative research. So if I, make any gaffes, please bear with me. It's a bit scary giving this talk, but for better or for worse, you're my guinea pigs in this one. So what got me into this, aside from the fact that, I grew up with a lot of poverty around me and it was very heartbreaking to see it, I had a conversation with a social entrepreneur maybe a decade ago. And he was in the same MBA program as I was in India. And he was the first person in India to start for-profit microfinance. And I was having dinner with him and his wife, who were both my classmates. And I kind of did something very antisocial, I would say. I kind of laid into him saying, you're charging 24% interest. That's like highway robbery, blah, blah, blah. How can you do that? How can you in good conscience give poor people money at those kinds of rates? And he, he's a more sober guy than I am. And so he sat me down and explained that, how things were. And what I understood was that charity was never going to be able to lift people out of poverty. And, capitalism has lifted hundreds of millions of people already out of poverty. But, we need the modern version of poverty, of capitalism, a la Professor Friedman, is a little bit heartless, and that we need a new model of capitalism. And that is the only way that we can have impact at scale to remove the poverty that still exists. I mean, even today, there are 800 million people who are living in abject poverty, defined as less than $1 a day in income. So this project actually focuses on people who live on approximately 40 cents a day. So they are abjectly poor. And it started out, I was invited to, I've written a book on emerging market multinationals, and AAK, which is a Swedish-Danish multinational corporations, one of the biggest players in the oils and fats business. So they're a B2B company. They sell to the cosmetics industry and the food industry as their primary customers. They invited me to their exco, which was held in Singapore, to give a talk during lunch about how can they compete in emerging markets. And through that process, I got to know the C-suite managers, and they told me about this CSR project that they had at that time in Burkina Faso, where they are the world's biggest player in shea, which is a wild crop. So it's not farmed because the tree takes 25 years to reach the fruiting age. And so it's not really economically viable to have shea plantations, but then it lives for 200 years. So there's about 175 years of productivity. And about 4 million women in West Africa. So there's this belt that passes through Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, Burkina Faso, all the way to the Rift Valley on the east. But most of the shea trees are concentrated around this West African region, Niger, Mali, and the other countries that I just mentioned. And the villagers have some of these trees growing on their farms. And then if you go out of the village into the bush, you have more trees. And so this product is collected by them. When the fruit falls off the tree, they collect it. They eat some of the fruit that started going bad. They feed their livestock. And then the kernels, they boil, dry, and then crack the shell, and they grind it to form shea butter. And that shea butter is used for food because they cook with shea butter in West Africa. And then what they don't need, they sell into a long supply chain, which shows up in little bottles in your home as a lotion for a hydrating cream. Or interestingly, 90% of it actually ends up in the food you eat. So for example, in the EU, chocolate can contain a shea butter derivative called cocoa butter equivalent up to 5%. And it's not an adulterant. It actually allows the chocolatier to manage the texture of the chocolate. So is it more crunchy? Is it more gooey? That is affected by how much shea butter you put into it. So it's not a cheap additive, but I'd never heard of this till I got involved in this project. So Anyway, so they allowed me access to, so I asked them, would you allow me to write a case study? Because I'd launched an elective at INSEAD called Business Models for Impact and Profit. And I had written a bunch of cases of companies based in India because that's where my social network is. And I could, call this guy, for example, who had the microfinance company and said, hey, can I write a case on your company or other similar companies? But I really needed to diversify the case studies to Africa, Latin America, etc. And so this was an opportunity. And then I thought, you know what, I'm going to go all the way to Burkina Faso and Ghana to interview the beneficiaries, the people who do the work on the ground, the supply chain people, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe I can write a qualitative paper. And so I got together with these two gentlemen, as you can see, Pierre-Jan Dolbeck, who's at Concordia University and is a student of Eileen Fisher at York, and Rajesh Nanarpuza, who's at the Indian Institute of Management, Udaipur, who I knew from an independent connection. And they're both qualitative researchers and assistant professors. So I kind of felt this was a great opportunity for them and a great opportunity for me because I could get them data and they could teach me how to do qualitative research, right? And so that's the genesis of the project. So I could turn around and say any errors in method, all their fault, but I won't. So here we are doing this project together, and it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. And so it began in 2017 when I went to Burkina Faso and at Ghana at the invitation of the people at AAK. And the project that I was studying had been started in 2009. So it had been around for about 8 years in Burkina. And then it had been extended to Ghana in 2015. And so those were the two sites. And so they had a management change. So they had a new chief operating officer who also had a stake in the company. And so he was very keen. He felt that he would love to scale the project. There are 4 million people, as I mentioned, who collect the shea kernels. I would say 4 million women because they are all women. And he said, I would like to scale, at that time they had about 100,000. He said, I would like to scale it to 1 million if I can. But right now, I cannot justify it because my shareholders will come after me because this costs a lot of money. And so unless I can monetize this in some way, I can't scale it any further. And so that kind of led to our research question that can you evolve a CSR program into a sustainable sourcing program that offers the firm a competitive advantage? Because now, if you can do that, then you have a scalable solution. And so that really was the research question that we came up with. And so I visited Ghana. I did interviews with the women who were actually collecting the shea for Colonna Faso, which is the brand that they created, the Colonna Faso, which translates in Burkina local language into House of Shea. So the women in the women's group who collected, I spoke to the frontline AAK employees who were extension workers who actually dealt with these women's groups. I spoke to the country level sustainable sourcing, the Burkina Faso executives. I spoke to the head of sourcing for shea. I spoke to the COO, the marketing people in Sweden and Denmark. And so we had collected a fair amount of interview data over multiple waves. So the first wave was all the people who were in Burkina Faso and Ghana, including the local managers. And a lot of it was done through actually all of it was done through translation by the extension worker because the villagers spoke the local tribal language. So it wasn't even French. So it was like Ghana has like 65 different tribal languages. So the extension worker had to be from the same tribe. And then the extension worker spoke. And in Burkina Faso, actually, the translation went from local tribal language to French, and from French to English. The head of the Burkina was a French lady who had settled down there because she married a local Burkinian man, and so she spoke fluent English. So it was like a multi-stage translation, which was kind of interesting to do. So it was quite painstaking, if you will. And the interviews with the people in Denmark and Sweden were done over Skype. Those interviews were done by all three of us together. So Pierre, Jan, Rajesh, and I, we collectively participated in those interviews. And then we collected all the material we could find, including internal presentations, their sustainability reports, et cetera, which was about 678 pages of communications that we had, which formed the corpus of our data. So we kind of coded in a cyclical manner. We used a grounded theory approach. We looked to see what we saw. Then we went and read the literature, and we said, okay, this is what we're hearing. This is how it fits in the literature. Maybe we need to think about these other things which we didn't code for. And so we went back and forth, between theory and data to come up with our understanding. And just to for your information, the paper is now being revised for resubmission to the Journal of Marketing, who gave us R&R. So I'm very, very pleased with that. All right, so these are the women who are the beneficiaries. Those headbands can carry about 25 kilos of the fallen fruits and kernels. The women go into the forest or into their farmland where the trees are during the shea season. They go in groups early in the morning at the crack of dawn. They would talk about how they got up at 4 a.m. and then they went out to collect this. These women were organized by AAK. So you see the woman with the yellow headdress and the AAK on her T-shirt. She's an extension worker, and you would go into the village and get a group going, and then you'd explain the program. That how it worked. For example, that AAK would come during the flowering season and ask them how many bags of shea can you give us? A bag is 80 kilos. And so how many bags can you give us? And then they paid them a pre-financing. So at that time, they gave you 1 bag's worth at an estimated market price based on last year's prices as an incentive to fulfill and the group as a whole was liable for the pre-financing. So if, let's say, there were 10 members in the group and collectively they agreed to 40 bags, then the group would be held to 40 bags. And if one woman in the group didn't deliver, then the other members would either have to make it up, and the way that they incentivized to complete the quota was by offering a bonus if they did. So if you delivered the 40 bags or more, then they would give you a small bonus of about 5%. Okay. They also opened bank accounts because they couldn't pay cash. both for reasons of corruption, etc., and transparency, but also because it was simply unsafe, because this lady who's the extension worker would actually have to go with a sack full of cash at the time of pre-financing, at the time of buying, and that's dangerous. And so they opened bank accounts for these women. They had never had a bank account, so it was all very novel. But it was an important part of the program because it opened the world to them in terms of financial inclusion, which they never had before. And then they were given training on how to actually process the shea better than the traditional method. So the traditional method was to boil the shea on this three-stove stone, as they call it. So there are three stones, and the pot is balanced on top of the stone. As you can see, it's a large pot. As you can see, it's filled to the top with the shea shea nut, sorry. And then they fill it with water and they boil it for an hour. Now, this is super inefficient because the heat escapes from every which way, right? And they boil it for an hour. It's a heavy pot full of water. And all they're trying to do is to kill the germination. So what AAK did was they taught them how to make what they call rocket stoves. Okay, so this is 2.5 times more fuel efficient. They also taught them that you only need to put 2 inches of water at the bottom instead of filling the pot, and boil it for 15 minutes till the steam kills the germination. So it reduced her labor in terms of collecting wood, in terms of collecting water, which are both, not running out of taps and get the gas. So it saved a lot of labor for them. It also saved them from smoke inhalation, because with this kind of the original stove system, the smoke escaped in every which way, and they were exposed to it. And it was also more likely to cause burn injuries, because if you think of a pot that big, full of boiling water, handling it after you've finished boiling is dangerous. Whereas here, you've pretty much boiled off all the water by the time it's done. You just, let it cool. It's a lot lighter. You can use a ladle to take out the nuts. You're done. And it's actually better for the quality of the outcome, because the nuts have absorbed less moisture. So the drying process is faster, which again saves time and money for the women. And importantly, if there is any moisture left, it damages the quality of the kernel from the point of view of extraction. So for AAK, it was a win that they got better quality product. These were then bagged by the women, and they trained them how to store these. So if you can see in the back behind the woman, that the sacks are just stacked up under a shelter. But the problem is that even if it is not exposed to direct rain, the earth is damp, and the damp seeps up. And so, they taught them how to build these little storage areas. And if they couldn't afford to build such a storage area, they did the simple thing. They said, lay some wood on the ground, like you could take these firewood pieces, lay it on the ground to create a separation. And since the sack would lean against the mud walls of the hut, they said put some vertical pieces so that it was isolated from the earth. So they did these little things to be able to get them, and then this improves quality. So again, it's better for AAK. And then they set up a scheme for collecting it. So this is on collection day. Those are the bags, 80 kilos roughly in each bag. So the women, with the help of the men, because these are too heavy for the women to carry, this is the only time the men help. The rest of it is all done by the women. The men there are way lazy lot. Okay, they're like, I have some photos of men just lounging around, drinking corn beer, and it's the women who do the heavy lifting. There. So historically, the women would go to market with those pans that you saw in the first picture I showed you. And the buyer would buy by the pan load or by a tomato tin load. Don't ask me why tomato tin, but there were these two sizes of measurement. So these guys said, no, it's by weight because volume is a very poor measure. And they would take this weighing scale with them, the truck that came to pick it up, and they would calibrate it in front of them. And what you see are three boxes of sugar. This is something that is everybody knows what it is. And the three boxes is 1 kilogram. Okay, and so they would show that, okay, look, it's showing 1 kilogram. So it in fact taught the women something also, that weight is more accurate and that the weighing scale needs to be calibrated. And then it would be weighed. There would be this is the Colorado Faso rep that you can see in the background. He's noting the weight of each bag against the name of the woman who's collected it. And this is the tomato tin that they measure it in. So you have, and then the bag is tagged, as you can see, that it was picked up at this. So the bag is tagged by the women's group. The woman is given a slip of paper which documents that you gave 2 bags, 5 bags, which weighed collectively, whatever number of kilos. That would enable, that shows that whether A, she fulfilled her commitment, and B, how much money she would get in the bank account, right? So it's recorded there that you gave X kilos at Y price. And by the way, the women are at liberty to sell it to anybody. So if they don't like the price AAK is offering, they can simply return the refinance amount, because if they've collected the right amount and the market price happens to be higher, which would be very unusual, she can sell it in the market and just give AAK the pre-finance back, no interest, nothing. It's like it's just, and then it's put on the trucks. For this, AAK pays some of the village men to help with loading the truck, and it goes off to Tamale in Ghana or Bobo in Burkina Faso for continued. So this program had a huge impact. So the first thing, let's talk about the pre-financing. The pre-financing is given at the beginning of the planting season. So I said that that's when the shea trees were in flower, right? So the pre-financing helps the women plant more of their land. So I never understood this, but people actually have more land than they can farm because they lack the cash to buy the farming inputs. It's kind of a really sad situation, right? That so this money helps them to buy seeds, buy fertilizer, buy pesticides, and for the women, they may not own, like, let's say, cattle to help them till the soil, so they can pay somebody who owns the cattle to come and till the land so that they can sow it. So it pays for that. It helps them to pay for the children's school fees, and some of them invest money in micro enterprises. So there, you can see a few examples here. So the bottom panel is something like a beignet in Burkina. This is from Burkina Faso. So it's a sweet bread that's fried. This lady, she makes it a couple of times a week and goes from door to door in her village and neighboring villages and sells it. How much do you think she would make a month from this activity? I just want to get a guess from one of you here.
Selling this.
How much margin does she make in euro?
It depends on how many units she sells.
Well, she sells like a thing like that twice a week. So 8 of those.
10 euros in the.
€1.
Yeah.
€1 in the month.
So imagine making that 8 times a month, going from door to door. But when you consider, I was shocked. And then I said, you know what?
Wow.
Their monthly income is €12, right? 40 cents a day. 40 cents a day, do the math. It's €12. So now if you make €1, you just made an 8% gain in your income. So it's really, it was like staggering to me just being there and saying, oh my God, I mean, €1, it's like, I went to the toilet at Gare de Lyon. I had to pay
Didn't have to
€1.
pay €1,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So, if you think about it, it's just like mind-boggling. And the two up on the two little containers on the top panel, it's basically the one on the right is a locally made soap that's used for washing. And so, you buy that and you resell it. And the other is like common day stuff like toothpaste, et cetera, that we use at home. And again, if you have like a child or a relative who comes from the local town to visit you, you tell them, can you bring X, Y, and Z? And then you resell it in your village for a small premium. And again, they make about like this $1 sum was repeated by pretty much all the micro entrepreneurs that I met there. Now, then I said they get a bonus. The bonus, some of the groups created a savings and loan product for their group. So you could say, my child's sick and I need, €2 to get the medicine. And then you would borrow and then you'd in a certain period of time to pay it back at a certain interest, right? So it was a private savings and loan. And it was really important because, one of the women said, before I used to beg, now I borrow. Think of the headspace change.
Before I used to
beg. Because if I needed €2 suddenly for my child's health, I had to go to people and say, please, can you give it to me? Because, 40 cents a day, where you have €2. But now I can borrow from this. So it's like so much more, self-worth that comes from
more
this,
empowered.
right? Yeah. Some of them did things like they invested in a grain grinder, and then the excess capacity they rented out to non-group women or to neighboring village women who did and made money off it. They repaired the village well because they were the people who were pulling the water out. And so if there was something wrong with the access to the well or whatever, they would fix those things. Or they repaired in one village, they repaired the roof of the school. And all of this had an impact on the women. So they were happier, as you can see from this happy face below. I mean, they all said they were happier. But the other thing is that their control over their resources went up. So before AAK entered, 73% had noted that they controlled the money they made from this selling the kernels in the local market. But that moved, by 2017 to 94%, or 2019, sorry. They did an audit and it showed that it moved to 94% at that time. So significant impact on women's power in the village hierarchy. So they were making more money, albeit tiny amount, but they were making more money. They had more self-respect, and they had more say in their daily lives, if you will. So what's the challenge? So that's the program. So what's the challenge? 2017, Burkina Faso didn't have a customer. All they did was they would bought this stuff and they would dump it into the same. So when the ships arrived, these sacks would be emptied into the hold, and they would all be mixed up. So there was no Burkina Faso product, if you will, because they didn't have any customers who were buying it. CSR the group had been making presentations in Denmark and Sweden, but they said we'd make presentations, but somehow nothing ever happened, right? So they wanted to, be recognized that they were doing something good that the customers would buy, but nothing happened. But at that time, several of the key customers in the confectionery sector, which accounts for 90% of the shea consumption, had made public statements that they were going to move to 100% sustainable sourcing by between 2025 and 2030, depending on the company. So, like large players like Barry Callebaut, had said by 2025 they were going to be 100% sustainable sourcing. Mars had said by 2030, 100% sustainable sourcing. So the COO and his team realized that if they could only figure out a way to move this from CSR to sustainable sourcing, there was money to be made and do good at scale. And so what could they do? So this is an overview of our findings. So the clear problem was that these people were doing something nice and interesting in West Africa, but the commercial arm of the organization was kind of deaf to their, and so there was this misalignment, if you will. And so the first step was like, get customers engaged, reduce compartmentalization, and generate customer intelligence related to sustainability. Then that led to transforming the sourcing program, the CSR program, I shouldn't call it the sourcing program, the CSR program, to align better with what the customers wanted. So, apply the customer intelligence, and the big shift was engage customers as partners. And on the transform marketing side, how do I get the sales and marketing team to be better trained? How do I help them develop communications? And how do I help them educate the clients? And then with these two pieces, they also were able to orchestrate resources outside the organization. And then collectively, these three things led to increased value capture and improved competitive advantage. So let me talk about each of these boxes in a little bit more detail. I have about another 10 minutes, right? Okay, now why is this not moving? Okay, that. Thank you. Nope. Oh, it says cancel. Okay, thank you. So they created the SHE task force as a cross-functional team. It was headed by the chief operating officer and had members from marketing, from CSR, and from the sourcing function. So it was a 4-member team, head of sourcing for SHE, COO, one of the big business development global heads, and the CSR head. And they kind of decided on things like which customers should we be targeting with this product, how should we deal with them. So one possibility, for example, was we have a limited amount of this Colonafasa SHE, we can give it all to one large customer, or we can share it amongst customers. Questions like that. This group. They also were the people who discussed how the customer intelligence could be used to improve the sourcing program itself, the CSR program itself, so that the balance between impact and profit could be maintained. And then they engaged with people who were boundary spanners. So somebody, for example, who had been in marketing but was now working in sourcing, or the other way around. And these people had knowledge of both sides of the game, and so they could then be pulled into meetings with customers because they had the power to explain, having understood this program. Then they said, okay, what kind of customers? So first they said that they had to be global firms. We're not interested in dealing with little firms. Already an AAK customer for SHE products, so it's not a way to get new customers, but to create stickiness with existing customers. Interested in sustainable sourcing and willing to buy 100% or at least a very significant percentage of shea as sustainable. So big buyers, big firms who would be big buyers of shea, who were already customers, would be a good way to think about the customer segment they went after. So this would be companies like Ferrero, Mars, Cloetta, etc. Then they generated customer-related intelligence, and they did two things. They looked at what these big companies had put out in the public domain. For example, in their sustainability reports, in public pronouncements, in the media, and so on and so forth, to say who are the people who were really interested in and were putting it in the. If you state it publicly, it's very difficult for you to not do it. And so that was one. And then they held interviews with these customers. Like, what are you really looking for when you say it's 100% sustainable sourcing? Is shea part of it? Okay, if shea is a part of it, by when do you expect to, achieve this? What exactly what does sustainability mean? Because it's a very big word. So for some people, for example, sustainability may mean reducing deforestation. For somebody else, it may mean that I want to help poor people. Somebody else, it might be water contamination, whatever. I mean, sustainability covers many, many things. So they tried to understand what aspect of sustainability, so to understand whether what they were doing, fit their belief about sustainability. Because there's no use telling somebody who's worried about climate change that, oh, we're helping poor women. Right? You have to tell them a climate change story. And so that helped them identify the customers and to fine tune their message. So the transformation of sourcing resources, one of the things they heard was that, well, you're not certified by anybody. And the reason that they hadn't gotten a certification because their belief was that they were hewing to higher standards than the certification. So why should we pay them? Certification costs. So their point was that if we give the certifying agency money for certification, that's not going to go to the women. So if we're doing something great already, then why should we give them the money? But the market wanted this. So they hired a university, some professor, to do an audit. I think it was from a French university, who went there and did an audit. And, they put that in the public domain. Then they started publishing a standard semi-annual shea sustainability report, which always contained a dashboard like this. So how many women? So as you can see, one of the things is that they had around 300,000 women by the time they had reached 2019 or 20, when is that? June 2020. So in 2017, when I started talking to them, they had about 100,000 women, and that had skyrocketed by 2020 to how many bank accounts were they building? How many village visits did the extension officers make? The number of rocket stoves they were building. And this is a mid-year report. So you see in 2020, they built less stoves. But that's not because in the year they built less stoves. It's because it's only a 6-month report. And today it has over 350,000 women enrolled in the program, notwithstanding COVID, right? Second thing is that they moved from thinking about customers as customers to customers as partners. Right? Because they were going after people who had a shared interest in sustainability. And so they started setting goals jointly. So you want this to be achieved? Okay, let's work together to see how our program can have that joint goal. So, and then they created a platform to enable partners to invest in Burkina Faso. So for example, Mars has now gotten into a 10-year agreement with them, which includes planting 10,000 share to buying the output of a certain number of women. I think it's 13,000 women that they've committed to, and also to build a certain number of rocket stoves. Okay. I'll talk about the other stuff in a moment. Okay, equipping sales and marketing, it began with bringing them for a site visit to Ghana. Why Ghana? Because, these people spoke English, they didn't speak French, it was a lot easier. And also by then, the Boko Haram had started creating an unstable situation in parts of Burkina, and they didn't want to have any risk of going there into the bush with their senior executives. So, and then these people who went for visits to Ghana then came back with all kinds of photographs, video clips, blah, 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 and they held training sessions for their team members, right? So, so it's one thing when a CSR person makes a presentation, I say, that's those guys, right? I mean, they're just the do-gooders, the tree huggers. But this was like, let's say, global head of brand of chocolate business. And now if he or she makes a presentation to the underlings, they pay attention. They watch the videos, they start thinking a little more. So they figured out how to equip sales and marketing teams. They developed sort of multi-channel communication materials. So for example, I've already talked about the dashboard and the impact reports. They also develop videos. So if you go on YouTube and you just put AAK Corona Faso, you'll see a bunch of videos where they talk about the program, they have the women talking about how much it's impacted their life, et cetera, and they're working with us. So I'm developing a VR case. So I have a paper case, and so the VR case costs about 50,000 euros to produce. Because they have to go to West Africa to film and everything. So I got Corona Faso to kick in the money to make this VR case, because part of it, they're going to use it for training their internal people. So it's one thing to show little video clips. It's another, you can, instead of taking them to Ghana, you can now make it happen on VR. It's also a marketing tool, because I can go to potential customer and say, look what we're doing. It's much more compelling when they watch it on VR, and the other option is they fly them to Ghana. So imagine I'm taking up 5 clients, first class tickets to and from Ghana, and then hospitality in Ghana. That would pay for that VR case.
Of course.
Right? So I kind of sold this idea to them, and they're willing to. And so we're building this VR case. It should be ready by the end of this academic year. And they made all this information accessible to each customer, and they developed the capacity to consult with customers on, what exactly are you looking for? How is this project a good fit for you, et cetera, et cetera. So that transformed the marketing function. Then it comes to orchestrating resources. So by working with these women who are external to the organization, these women actually have a very good idea, looking at how many flowers the trees have, how big the crop will be this year.
Oh, nice.
Right? So they were using some forecasting method, but this women's implicit knowledge was far better predictor of outcome than their internal forecasting models. So they, by working with these women, had a better understanding of how much shea was going to come, and they were able to sign contracts with the supply middlemen. So they still have, there's still 3.6 million women who are doing it external to their program. So they still buy a lot of conventional shea. And so they were able to do that better, because they knew what supply was going to look like. Second benefit for AAK was that they got an access to a broad spectrum of executives within the customer organization. So, for example, the CEO of AAK and the CEO of Mars jointly put out a statement about this new program. So now, there's this board level connection, there's the connection at the level of purchasing and marketing, then there's the CSR to CSR connection. So you have a much broader connection internally, which in your customer's organization, which creates more stickiness, right? For the Colonna Faso collectors, we already talked about how they benefited because they had to put in less labor, it was safer, they had access to bank accounts, and by increasing the women's knowledge about things like how do you measure humidity, how do you weight instead of volume, they were able to question the middlemen and have an impact on how the whole market works, right? And for customers, it facilitated opportunity to create impact and created employee engagement. So for example, 3 employees at Beiersdorf, makers of Nivea, produced this product as a side project because they were so inspired that Beiersdorf was buying this sustainable shea that they created this lip balm, which they're selling for whatever. And it's 100% sustainable shea. And the pictures, etc., are all provided by AAK. So this is the skill that AAK has developed to be able to work with customers as partners to help them achieve their goals. And this, the profits from this actually flow back into Colonna Faso. That was what these 3 people who did this in their spare time wanted from Beiersdorf. So it's created this virtual cycle where everybody's gaining. The Colonna Faso's program is gaining, AAK as a company is gaining, its suppliers its customers are gaining, and most importantly, the women who do the collection are gaining. Do they have customers? Yeah, these are customers today. They have other customers, but these have all declared that they're customers in the public domain. So I can share these names without any confidentiality issues. So these are sort of some of the who's who of the buyer world. The program has expanded. It is now not only in Burkina and Ghana, but also in, where is that country? Which country is that?
Ivory Coast.
It's in Ivory Coast. Yeah, you're right. It's in Ivory Coast. They expanded into Nigeria, but they've now killed that because they found it too dangerous. So, so the program has expanded. They've been recognized. So, and importantly, talking about orchestrating external resources, Mars brought USAID to the table. It brought livelihoods to the table because livelihoods is a joint venture between Mars and Danone. It's they channel their CSR money through this NGO. They created this NGO. And they channel all their CSR funds through it, and they brought USAID to the table. USAID pays for some of the cost of the training of the women and the building of the stoves, because the US is now interested in climate change, and so it's called the WISH Initiative, Women in Shea Initiative. And the AAK, has been, it's in the top whatever of sustainable sourcing. And so, this has been a recognition boost for them. Internally, they've the AAK has restructured. So now they have a sustainable program manager in West Africa. So the lady who was running the Burkina Faso operation, she's been promoted. She's in Niger and manages the advantage of this is that it enables them to do what MNCs do best, take learning from one place and apply it in the other place. So if the local managers in Burkina develop some initiative that works, then it can easily be moved to Ghana or to Niger or to Côte d'Ivoire, as the case may be. It also allows for better connection between, before it was these little isolated programs, whereas now you have corporate sustainability, sourcing, and sustainable sourcing can all be more easily connected. Business alignment between Burkina Faso and the business development people. Better coordination with the GSA. GSA is the Shea Association, Global Shea Association. That's what it stands for. And so they work more closely with them today for various initiatives that they float, which can then get all the shea buyers in the world involved in those. So which, again, they orchestrate that. And this signals that they're in it for the long haul to the governments of these countries. And that's important because as you have a say in legislation now, right? Because you're playing this important role, you're working with 350,000 poor women with the goal of scaling it to 1 million. These governments are happy with what they're doing, which means that when they think about various policies, these are the companies whose voices would be heard more. So AAK has a voice at that table. So what do we think we contribute? One is there's a big literature on the fact that strategic CSR has a positive impact on ROI, blah, 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 blah. But none of that literature actually explains how. And so what we've done is to say, here's how you can do it. So it's a recipe for how. And that's important because Porter's idea of shared value has been criticized heavily for great idea, but how do you do it, right? And this clearly speaks to that how. So it speaks to the shared value literature too. And the two key things is center customers, so bring customers into the equation, because if you think about it, what is sustainable competitive advantage? The key thing is it creating unique value for customers? And the only way you can do that is if you really bring customers into the equation. And so it's a very obvious statement, but this gap is there. And, we kind of have a suggestion as to how you can do this and how you can reduce the compartmentalization between customers, the marketing people, and the CSR people. Okay. And so it offers then a framework to practitioners as to how you can go about it. And the other last point I'd like to make is that one of the things that it struck us is that, look, CSR money is a great way to experiment as to what can we make into a sustainable program. Because CSR money, so one of the big things is that, when you're fighting for resources in a company, you go and you say, and they'll tell you, okay, what's the business case for this? Well, CSR, there's no business case. It's charity. But I can use those CSR funds to get to the business case for sustainable solutions. So let me stop there. I guess we have a few minutes left, and I'm happy to take questions.
All right.
Very good.
Perfect.
Really enjoyed the talk. Super fascinating case study. I have a question. So is it just a change in the positioning is it are you simply calling CSR initiative a sourcing initiative? I see there's a lot that has happened, right? But basically from what I got is that when they were calling this a CSR initiative, people were not necessarily interested in it. And then when you position it as a sustainable sourcing initiative, then suddenly everyone was interested.
So you're right that there is.
It's provocative and purpose, right?
It's a fair question. So I think that, yes, it is moving from CSR to, you could call it sustainable sourcing or strategic CSR. Okay, because that's the distinction in the literature, CSR versus strategic CSR. So they've moved it from being CSR to strategic CSR.
Okay.
Okay, now for that to happen, how? I mean, you were giving a little bit of money and these people were going. I didn't get into the details, but when we arrived, the program was struggling with bad debt because it's a CSR program. So I would never worry about these women paying me back. Okay, you didn't deliver the amount you said you would deliver. All right, keep the free financing. So it was charity because it's a whole different mindset, right? And so I think this move from charity to business, right, is important. And the interesting question there is, so if I make it business, then I lose the charity part, the impact part, right? There are two competing goals. I want to make money, a la Mr. Friedman, or I want to do good. And he said we shouldn't be doing the two together. That's not the job of business to do good. And so how do you get the two to work together? So yes, it's a repositioning in the minds of the people, but how do you do that? Right? I mean, it's easy to say, yes, it's a repositioning, but how? Because if you just, the COO had gotten up and sent emails and made a presentation saying, from tomorrow, this will be called sustainable sourcing and you should all pay attention, it would probably have fallen flat because the marketing people don't know. How do you sell such a complex program? Like, today they're able to get a premium price for this product. Why are they able to get a premium price? Because they can say, look at our costs. We pay the women the same as the middlemen would pay because we are not asking them to give us a discount. But they had to walk to the village market to sell it, which may be 10 kilometers away carrying a 25 kilo headpan. But we are now picking it up from their village. The cost of those little trucks going back and forth, the cost of paying the local men to load the truck, the cost of the truck driver, we're paying the same. All those are incremental costs. So how do we, we're building these rocket stoves. We're providing training to these women. We go there and help them open bank accounts. Everything costs. So there's a significant cost premium that we are paying. Unless you understand that, if I come to you and say it's sustainable, pay more, you say, get out of here. Right? So how do you do that? And how do you equip the marketing people to achieve that? So all of those things really become highly germane in successfully implementing the repositioning. So yes, at the very high level, it is a reframing or repositioning, but how? That's where our contribution is.
I have a question here. So it sounds like when you said CSR, there are multiple companies CSR involved. There's AAK's CSR, which is this
Kelowna
Faso program, which sounds like a side project besides their main business sourcing from traditional or conventional ways of sourcing shea. And then there are the CSR programs of the buyer company of the of Mars of
no, it's not the CSR program of
Federal.
Mars.
Yes, yes. So here is my question. Where, so who should be making the initiative? Or in the case where the AAK's CSR is building a business on its own and supplying their bigger buyers, who can then use their case to put out CSR message or claim some sort of sustainable sourcing. Who needs to put more effort into it? Is that
So I think if you look at it, it's driven, the whole thing is driven by the fact that end consumers are demanding sustainability. I don't think that, Mars or Ferrero or whoever, out of the goodness of their hearts, are saying, oh, let's be more concerned about impact. Because if at birth of these companies they had been committed to impact, they wouldn't need to make the announcements today. They would have made the announcement back then. So something has happened. What happened? Well, it could be that they realize that the world is going to hell in a handbasket and they better do something. Otherwise, there'll be no planet, no humans, and no Mars or no whatever, right? Or it could be that customers are saying, well, we would prefer to buy from somebody who provides it, or maybe end customers are saying that we're willing to pay more. In fact, there's survey research that shows that around 2016, the tipping point was reached where surveyed customers say they are willing to pay more for sustainable products. Okay, and this is only becoming, and it's the people who are members of the millennials and Gen Z are much more likely to say so. In fact, it also has an impact on war on talent. Millennials and Gen Z people will take a job, more likely to take a job if the company is sensitive to the social impact, and two, are less likely to change jobs if they're in a company that's is behaving sustainably. So it's both on the side of the cost of labor, so to speak, or cost of talent, and on the side of what customers are willing to pay for. So that's driving the Mars and so on of this world. Yeah. And we saw the Beiersdorf example of how this change led these people, 3 people in the organization, to invest their own time to create this special product, right? So it creates employee engagement.
And the 3 people are still from AAK?
No, they're at Beiersdorf.
Beiersdorf.
Okay, so Beiersdorf employees were inspired by the fact that their company was buying this cool new ingredient, and they made a product with this ingredient, and they're selling it, and they are contributing that money back to Burkina Faso. So it's the whole value chain is moving in a direction because customers want to move in that direction. The end customer wants sustainable, or there's a sizable body of end customer, not everybody, but there's a sizable number of people who are willing to pay. Unilever has declared that its sustainable lines are performing financially 69% better than their non-financially. So it is financial. So at the end of the day, you make more money for shareholders by behaving sustainably than non-sustainably because of the way the world is today.
Yes.
So, so all of these players are basically dancing to market demand.
Yes, but my question is, I guess I didn't ask clearly. Although we talk about vertical integration, but it's not happening as in this case, AAK is still the sourcing company that's supplying the final production company who produced the consumer goods. Although the fast-moving consumer goods companies have the incentive to do good, but because they need to source elsewhere, they might not be able to initiate this kind of CSR projects in their supply chain. So that's why I was asking the question, is that more feasible for the provider companies, the sourcing companies to create this kind of CSR campaigns and then use them to appeal to those companies who have
Not
the need?
necessarily, because the commitments by it, so every company is looking for where is the market going, right? And so AAKA looks at the world and says, okay, all these people are making sustainability commitments, which means they want sustainable products from us, because that's the only way they're going to get there. And if I don't go there, somebody else will, right? Because they're not the only player in the world buying shea. Now, they were the first mover. And so they've, in a sense, cornered the market, right? Their competitors are way, way, way behind in producing sustainable products. And so they have created a competitive advantage by being first to see what's in the offing and reacting to it. If they hadn't reacted, maybe somebody else would have, but that's how everything moves, right? I mean, if you think back and say, well, what made Dell so successful 20 years ago? They were the first to build the online model. Today, everybody sells computers using the online model of Dell. So people caught up, but they were able to structure a certain type of supply chain and do it. And other companies said, oh, gosh, look at them making money. And if you had invested $1,000 on the day Dell had its IPO, in 5 years, you'd have been a millionaire. Okay, that's how fast their stock value grew. So I think that companies, as the world evolves, as end consumers change, as their demands put pressure on existing business models, companies start reacting because they want to make money, right? How often, if you do any executive training, you hear, oh, our customers are disloyal. They're disloyal because you're not giving them what they want. You're just like every other player in the market. So they're not disloyal. They're just telling you that you're worthless. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. I mean, you didn't respond to their needs. And so they're saying that shampoo, this shampoo, that sausage, this sausage, they're all the same. So I'll buy the cheapest, right? But if you can do something that's special, then you can charge a premium. Because now you're telling the large group of customers who are saying, I want sustainability, that I have this sustainable option. And it's quite large because they're already, so AAK accounts for 55% of the shea buying in the world. Now, 4 million women collect. They already have close to 400,000 women working for them. That's 10% of the collectors. That means that's 20% of their supply. Think of it that way, because they're half and they've got 10% of. They want to grow it to 1 million. When they get it to 1 million, that's going to be a quarter, which means half the shea that they're going to sell will be sustainable. That's huge, right? So I think that in the end, the pressure comes from what customers want. Because if I produce sustainable shea, nobody wants to buy it. My costs will reduce my profitability. And I won't do it.
I see Dominique is online and
Yes,
had a
hello.
question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hello, Professor. Sorry
Hi.
not to be with you in the room. And thank you very much for your presentation. I have a general question. One of our objectives in our UNESCO chair is to find ways toward what we call learn from Africa. This means not only identifying good practices, but also better understanding of other ways of being in the world or of being in economic relationships that could serve as a guide for changing Western representation of their own behaviors or strategies. From your own experience and the work you have just presented to us, do you think it would be possible to develop or analyze the reasons, the means, the behavior, the qualities from which we could learn from Africa something?
Are you saying that is there a general learning that we could that was developed in Africa that we could the rest of the world could learn from? Is that the question?
The question is, I think that all of us are totally trapped in our own assumption and representations. And one of our objectives is to see if from an outer world we can learn something differently, and we can try to change and to get out of that kind of trap, out of that kind of assumption. And my feeling is that sometime from the outside we can learn something, not to change the world, but at least to be more aware of our own assumption about the world and about commercial relationships.
Yeah, I think that you do learn by simply the person who started this initiative or was made responsible for starting this initiative was a Danish gentleman by the name of Mads Fear. Mads spent 6 months in rural Burkina Faso studying how the women worked and how they sold and what were the pain points and so on and so forth, to really understand their lives as it was. And it was an adaptation of the program to fit into that life, and improve that life. Right? So it wasn't like, guys, here's what I recommend that you do and do something differently. They still get up at 4 a.m. They still, cook the family's breakfast, and they go collectively collect the fruit, blah, blah, blah. But they have started doing things that can help the women. So for example, as I said, they've helped them with how do you kill the germination, which requires less wood collection, less water collection, drawing it out of a well, in a pot where you steam it, which increases safety. They've now actually started a shelling program, because the way it's shelled is that it's spread on the ground and then they beat it with a stick. And then they take it in a basket and they toss it up, and the wind blows away the chaff, and the kernels fall back down because they're heavier. So they've developed a machine that they can then take there, which does this for them, because this is one of the most labor-intensive parts of the process. So rather than try and say, do things differently, they've just said, here's how we can help. And it's up to you. You can continue boiling it on the 3-stone stove and do it the way you did. But look, this has this advantage. And if you want it, we'll help you to build it. And the rocket stove, as it's called, is built with mud, cow dung, and straw. It's all locally available. So it's just being able to create the mix and to form it. As soon as you impart the skill, they have it. They can use it then for their own cooking, which improves their lives further, right? Because the shay is typically cooked in a public space where they have the big 3-stone stove, but they can make a smaller version of the rocket stove in front of their little hut for their own personal cooking. So it's about understanding the way you live with your culture, and then helping you to get better, and not bringing the value judgment that, oh my God, but rather the humility that this is how they've lived. And, to me, it was incredibly humbling to think that these people live on 40 cents a day. I mean, it's an unimaginably tiny number.
So what you are saying is that finally the experience was in fact a kind of cross-fertilization from which each actor could learn differently and see things differently.
Yes, yes. And
That-
it was when they flew the sales and marketing people to the project that opened their eyes. Oh my God, look at how much our company is, what impact our company is happening. And this is a great thing that we are doing. And this is a story that we need to take to market. Right. So it is, it aligns with one of the four factors, the interorganizational and territorial piece in your four-factor model.
Exactly. This makes me want to continue the project we had in the past, and that project was called Economic Peace Territory. And the main aspect of that project was just to create a kind of safe place and safe moment to allow different kind of actors to work together and to imagine what could be another future, not being trapped, each of us, in our own assumption about world and economic world. Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Dominique. Thank you for inviting me here today.
That was a pleasure.
Do we have?
Good morning.
Good
Hi.
morning.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Vanessa Mendes from the UNESCO Chair toward a Culture of Peace. Thank you very much for your presentation. I understand that large multinationals are interested in serving low-income markets because there is a return on investment at stake, and even though it's quite expensive for them to adopt a specific strategy for the bottom of the pyramid market, such as product redesign, product development, creation of new distribution channel, and so on, there is an interest for them that lies in economic benefit. My question is, what when a large company decides to go for a bottom of the pyramid strategy, what is the concern they have about empowering the people that will be the beneficiaries of their of this strategy? In other terms, beyond the fact that they know they educate future potential consumers for their brands, what is the importance to them about regarding the education of these people in equipping them with tools for them to become empowered? I don't know if my question is clear enough.
Well, let me see if I got it and by giving you an answer, and then you can tell me whether I missed the question or not. So I think that whether it's on engaging poor people on the supply side, as the AAK case was, or whether, let's say, you're engaging them on the demand side by providing them with products and services that they didn't have. For example, Novartis has a program which was started in India in around 2004 and is now present not only in India, but in Vietnam, Indonesia, Kenya, and so on, called Healthy Family. And this was led by the then head of human resources, Mr. Brokatsky Geiger, who was on the board of Novartis. They were influenced by C.K. Prahlad's book and the pot of gold at the bottom of the pyramid. And they started an initiative to see whether they could actually have a sustainability meaning profitable program at the bottom of the pyramid. And they chose India as the initial site because India has the largest number of poor people in the world. I guess if you have a population of 1.4 billion people, then no matter the fraction that's really poor, it's still a very large number. And so they started this program in India to try and see. So they were present in urban India, selling to people in the lower middle class and upwards the medications that you and I generally would get for the diseases that they spoke to. And so this was an effort to enter into rural India and to target people who earned less than $2 a day. Okay, that was the target market, rural, less than $2 a day. And they built an entire program. In India, it was called Arogya Parivar, which they translated later to mean healthy family. And they experimented with various ways to how do we actually make this program work. One of the things was that it was a separate business entity from Novartis. So they were no longer tied by the multinational salary structures and so on and so forth. They could go and hire at domestic rates, right? So if you're an employee at, let's say, Unilever in India, you make a lot more than, let's say, an equivalent company like Marico, which is a domestic fast-moving consumer goods player in the toiletry space. Your salaries would be significantly different. It would be lower with Marico. It would be more attuned to the Indian salary levels. And so they created a separate business. They then went out there and really tried to understand what prevented these women, poor men and women from getting healthcare. And they had a lot of interesting insights. So first of all, people didn't know they were sick until they were deadly sick. So you were coughing blood. That's when you said, okay, I'm sick. I need to see a doctor. I have tuberculosis, which has spread to the point that I'm coughing up blood. In India, it was seen in poor rural households, it was seen as a condition of women to faint. And they realized that in India, traditional households, the woman eats last. So the men sit down, they eat, and then the women eat after that. If you're poor, then you're already struggling with putting enough food on the table. And if you're eating last, you get even less food. So you're terribly malnourished. So you fainted not because it was a condition of women, but it was a severe malnutrition. But they didn't see it that way. So there was this huge educational program to try and get people to understand this. And they worked with the government of India's extension programs to educate these people. Now, how do you develop the materials? I mean, these are oftentimes illiterate people. How do you engage with them? How do you, what kinds of materials do you need? They tried various things, and it was, like, for example, they wrote a script for a drama, which you have local theater in India, but then the local theater people always embellished it and the message was often lost. They tried various initiatives till they figured out a way to deal with this problem. And so each of these things they discovered, then poor people didn't know what a doctor was. So there was a local person in the village who was a pretend doctor. It was typically a man, so I'll use the word he. He would dress in a lab coat, a white lab coat. He'd have a stethoscope and the gizmo for taking blood pressure and a thermometer. That were the tools of his trade. He had typically no education in medicine, but had worked at a pharmacy. Indians are very nosy culturally. So you come with a prescription to the pharmacist, and the pharmacist will, or the person who's attending to you, will ask you, who's sick? What are they sick with? Right? I mean, there's this whole dialogue. Why am I giving you this medication? It's not like, okay, you've prescribed erythromycin or whatever it is. Here you go, the 10 tablets you wanted. There's this whole dialogue around, why am I giving it to you? And so I learned as the person at the counter that, if you have X, this is the medicine. So for a lot of common diseases, they learn what to give, how much to give, and so on. Then they say, okay, I can make more money by doing this. So they go to a village which has maybe 800, 200 homes with 800 people, and they charge a tiny amount, typically 5 rupees, which in terms of euro would be about 5 cents. today for a consultation. So you come to me, I take your blood pressure, I, use my stethoscope, my thermometer, and then I give you some medicine. Where do they make their money? They buy expired medicines from the pharmacies. And then they sell it at the full price. People don't know, these poor people are illiterate. They don't know that medicines expire. Now, the good news is that expired medicines are not harmful. They maintain most of their efficacy years after the expiration date. But the problem is that when I come with something like TB, they don't know what the hell is going on. They don't know how to treat it, or HIV, or any of the more severe diseases that could spread in these rural areas. And then they're mistreated by overdosing them with antibiotics, this, that, and the other. So the second problem was, how do I get these people to understand what a real doctor is and where I can contact them? So they built this whole infrastructure, which was a win-win solution throughout. So the doctors that they got engaged, they were making more money now because they were getting more patients. These poor people knew who the right doctor to go to was. And then they got local pharmacies to carry the medicines they would prescribe. And of course, Novartis was selling Novartis medicines. And so they created a whole infrastructure to provide proper health care and increase the knowledge of these people in terms of, disease awareness, in terms of general health, hygiene, and, whom to reach out to for help. So it really, that is empowerment, right? That's serious empowerment. And you did this by kind of understanding, what did the real doctor in the large rural village want? What did the government of India want with its extension, the workers who were minimally, nurses with training in childbirth. And so they were able to engage this whole community to be able to create this program. And it now serves millions of people in India, and its success, I can only say, is proven by the fact they've expanded it into Vietnam, into Kenya, into Indonesia, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much for your very comprehensive answer. And actually, what your example echoes another example you might be aware of. It's about Essilor, the French vision care company who implemented a bottom of the pyramid program in India, which is called iMitra, and which actually proposes, eye care services in remote rural communities. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it was very explicit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have to go. Thank you very much.
All right.
Once again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Great. I guess if there is no more questions, this will be our time. Thank you guys very much again for attending and for watching this wonderful talk online. Thank you very much and goodbye.